This is CBC Vancouver News.
It really hurts when somebody at a desk in government can tell me what I can do with my property.
BC's new short-term rental restrictions are now in effect. What that means for owners and community.
Are we, as a destination, offering a large enough inventory supply?
And
every step along the way, it was trying to take wind out of our sails.
despite protests, court challenges, and massive costs, the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion is pushing ahead. But opponents vow to keep protecting their community. Plus,
now you're expecting a person who feels under the weather. The last thing they want to do is possibly get on a bus or get into their vehicle.
some BC doctors say enough with sick notes. They're urging the province to limit how often employers can ask for one. Hello, I'm Janella Hamilton. Thanks for joining us. The province's new short-term rental restrictions are now in effect in many parts of BC, limiting services like Airbnb to people's principal property. We go to the Okanagan first, where tourism is big business. Kelowna hosted more than 2 million overnight guests last year. And as Megan Turcato reports, some are wondering where they will all stay now.
Don't ask me if I'm angry, but I certainly am.
Ralph Gurlich and his wife Tina have made the difficult decision to sell their family home due to BC's new short-term rental rules. They live in a bungalow and purchased this second property in a Kelowna high-rise to list on Airbnb.
And we ran for 2 years, and it was wonderful.
That all changes now. BC is cracking down on short-term rentals in an effort to address the housing crisis. In many BC communities, short-term rentals will only be allowed on a homeowner's principal property. Gurlich says they have to shut down their Airbnb, and it doesn't bring in enough as a long-term rental to cover all the costs. On top of that, they now can't afford to keep their house and will move into the condo.
This was our Hail Mary for retirement, and it really hurts when somebody at a desk in government can tell me what I can do with my property.
Okanagan wine and adventure tour operator Christina Rossworm is nervous about what restrictions on short-term rentals will mean for her business.
I've never done advertising before, and now I am because I am afraid of what's going to happen.
Rossworm is skeptical hotels will have enough capacity and worries fewer options will mean higher prices.
I think hotels, especially the really big chains, are going to have a complete and total monopoly. And so they're going to be able to run the prices the way they want. And so I don't know. It's just going to become another destination that's for very wealthy people, and the average person won't be able to afford to come here anymore.
Rudolph Heider says that's unlikely. As the director of hospitality for Argus Properties, which has 4 hotels in the area, he says hotels have space to accommodate more tourists.
I don't think it'll bring that much demand that you can really push pricing. And I think we have enough room, even during those months, to really take the additional demand.
Heider says it's been a challenge to retain staff because of housing costs and a low rental rate.
We have, over the last couple of years, seen quite a few managers, entry level up to department head managers, leave Kelowna and go to other places, aka Kamloops Trail, etc., because housing is just not affordable anymore.
Tourism Kelowna is unsure exactly what the new rules will mean. It says hotels provide about 4,500 rooms per night, and during peak seasons, there are currently about 2,000 active short-term rental listings. How that will change isn't clear. During the summer peak, short-term rentals have made up about 30% of Kelowna's accommodation inventory.
What I'm watching is, are we, as a destination, offering a large enough inventory supply, and are we offering a larger enough variety? And that's the piece we're going to have to monitor.
As the new rules come into force, there are still a lot of questions. Airbnb says it doesn't know yet how many listings in BC might have to stop operating. But what isn't in question is what it will mean for former Airbnb owner Ralph Gurlich. He'll be handing over the keys of his home to a new owner.
There'll be tears. For sure there'll be tears, yeah.
Megan Turcato, CBC News, Kelowna.
As you heard, the push to crack down on short-term rentals to ease the housing crisis is having some unforeseen impacts. While some smaller resort communities and tourist destinations are exempt, including Whistler, others have chosen to opt in, like Bowen Island. Meanwhile, 4 communities have been allowed to opt out. They are West Kelowna, Fort St. John, Dawson Creek, Pouskoupi. Property owners say new rules failed to consider the consequences for mom-and-pop operators who could suffer significant financial losses. Earlier this month, more than 300 owners filed a petition in BC Supreme Court claiming the rules are not legal.
They're canceling people's businesses at the moment and people that were licensed and lawful. So it's affecting a lot of people across the province. You know, we're challenging the legislation based on vested rights of people that operated above board and above the law, and those rights are being canceled.
He says the shift in the short-term rental landscape came too fast with little consultation. In March, provincial data showed more than 19,000 entire homes being listed as short-term rentals. The government hopes the changes will increase long-term housing stock in cities where people struggle to find appropriate housing. Oil is now flowing in the expanded Trans Mountain pipeline from Alberta to Burnaby. The mega project faced no shortage of hurdles getting built, including soaring costs, protests, and court challenges. As John Hernandez reports, its biggest opponents stand by their efforts to shut it down, even if they didn't succeed.
12 years and more than $30 billion later, the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion officially started commercial operations Wednesday. The pipeline tripling the flow of crude from Alberta to coastal BC. Here, it's a tough pill to swallow for many who fought it.
So we make these efforts to clean it and to take care of it, but also we have to prevent things that create destruction.
Tsleil-Waututh First Nation member Reuben George among many vocal opponents and part of a court challenge to stop the pipeline, claiming First Nations weren't adequately consulted. It was dismissed.
Every step along the way, it was trying to take wind out of our sails.
Court challenges levied by the city of Burnaby also didn't work. The city's former mayor called it a David versus Goliath matchup.
The issue was always on a back burner. And with that kind of corporate money and the federal government behind it, it was pretty well an impossible battle.
His successor begrudgingly says it's time to adapt.
We're disappointed that the project's here, but we have to deal with it now. And so we have to provide as much public safety as we possibly can, protect our environment, but most importantly, protect our residents.
Public safety measures, including 2 new fire halls at Burnaby Mountain, one of which just meters away from the expanded tank farm, both built in part to respond to pipeline-related emergencies. Trans Mountain says its own emergency response plans are in place in the event of any spills or fires. Meanwhile, old opponents still vow to protect their community.
Because this is finished, I don't stop like my ancestors haven't stopped. We're still going to continue to be stewards of our lands and our waters and our people.
Tankers will begin loading up at this terminal in just a couple of weeks, as many here hope a worst-case scenario never becomes a reality. John Hernandez, CBC News, Burnaby.
Tensions were high at a public meeting in White Rock last night. It comes after police arrested a man linked to 2 stabbings near the city's waterfront last week, one of which was deadly. As Yasmin Khanea reports, people peppered the RCMP with questions about public safety.
A quiet day on the pier after a tense night.
Even I didn't know that there's a stabbing because there was not much awareness.
Residents, including the brother of last week's fatal stabbing on the promenade, packed into a community center, holding signs demanding justice for Kulwinder Singh Sohi, killed last Tuesday. White Rock RCMP were asked why an emergency alert wasn't issued after the first stabbing. Police say the incident did not meet the threshold.
Police assessed the situation. They put all the resources that were required in there. It got considerable coverage in the media. Police made this very high profile. I think the police did an incredible job.
RCMP have increased patrols around the waterfront.
The enhanced summer patrols normally start mid-May, prior to the May long weekend. However, we enacted them right away after last week's events.
Meanwhile, White Rock Mayor Megan Knight drew flack from some at the meeting after saying she personally felt safe in the community and encouraging people to continue to support local businesses. She later told CBC News she did not want to offend those who are fearful.
I said, if you're not comfortable going, that's fine. I'm going.
Days after the stabbing, some community members are still on edge.
Definitely it's very uncomfortable to hear this because it doesn't seem to be this sort of place, you know.
Community perception of safety has changed gradually over the years. I mean, I've lived here for 45 years, but particularly in the last few months.
Others say they can't live in fear.
No, I don't have any concerns about the safety.
This sketch artist came to the pier every day before the attacks and says he'll stay.
I want to give message to all community to be don't scared.
A suspect has been arrested in relation to the fatal stabbing and charged with aggravated assault in the other attack as police continue to investigate. Yasmin Raneya, CBC News, White Rock.
Some BC doctors have a prescription for the province: limit how often employers can require sick notes from employees. They say it puts unnecessary burden on both physicians and patients. And as Michelle Gomez explains, they found a new way to get their message across.
Family doctors frustrated by writing sick notes have created this template for patients to give to their employers. It explains sick notes put an unnecessary burden on doctors who are experiencing heavy workloads and burnout as a primary care crisis rages on.
Our response, in combination with the BC College of Family Physicians, was to create this template that family physicians could share with their patients, to give to their employers, to send the message that sick notes are unnecessary.
Ali says because the provision of sick notes isn't covered by insurance, patients often have to pay out of pocket. The typical cost around $50.
Now you're expecting a person who feels under the weather. The last thing they want to do is possibly get on a bus or get into their vehicle or ask someone for a ride to go to the doctor's office, get assessed.
A sentiment shared by British Columbians.
We shouldn't need that if that's already benefits and our rights as workers if we are employed. So sick notes, I don't really think that should be a thing.
Do you have a doctor that you could go to if you have to get a note?
No, not now. For now, I'm just go walking. Yeah, I have no many choice, I think.
As of 2023, employers in Nova Scotia can only request a note if the absence is longer than 5 days. And new legislation in Ontario will force employers to scrap sick notes for the 3 days of provincially mandated annual sick leave. Ali says BC needs to follow suit.
But ironically enough, the government of British Columbia has a particular sick note that they expect for all their employees. That is one of the most kind of onerous to fill out. And so it seems kind of ironic that our own government is one of the employers who asks us to fill out extra paperwork for sick notes.
The BC Ministry of Labour said while employers are able to request doctor's notes, they should be thoughtful about when they're required. It did not respond to questions about whether it is considering legislation. Michelle Gomez, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC's Auditor General is about to put the province under the microscope, looking at how the government handled Lytton's recovery effort. The village was destroyed by a raging fire 3 years ago. The MLA for the area says she's disappointed by how long the process has taken.
I think one of the difficulties, certainly, that Lytton has highlighted is that we need clear and concise processes in this province.
She says there has been confusion around who makes the final decision on recovery projects. So far, the BC government has given $8.3 million towards Lytton's recovery. Quesnel City Council has voted unanimously to censor the mayor, claiming he damaged relations with First Nations. Mayor Ron Paul's wife handed out a book that minimizes the harms of residential schools. Paul also recommended the book to the chairperson of the Cariboo Regional District. As Betsy Trumpener reports, the local First Nations say council is taking the step in the right direction by condemning his actions.
Last month, a large protest marched to Quesnel City Hall. Some called for Mayor Ron Paul to resign. Tuesday night, Quesnel City Council took action, voting unanimously to censure the mayor, claiming he damaged relations with First Nations. This comes after the mayor and his wife publicly supported a book titled Grave Error. The Union of BC Indian Chiefs calls the book residential school denialism. Lytton Dene Chief Clifford LeBrun calls it hate literature.
We cannot go on working with the mayor unless he does something incredible, like apologize and take ownership of what he's done.
Well, City Council can't force the mayor out. Sanctions will take away his travel budget and remove him from city committees and government bodies.
I just feel that it's so inappropriate for us to be damaging our relationships with the Indigenous population.
The intention of a censure motion is to draw attention to the misconduct and to formally disassociate the other members from the offending member's behavior.
Despite the censure, the mayor says he plans to stay on.
I just want to stop here and say that I'm going to give my detractors and the people that are sort of launching this charge against me, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that this is all based on a misunderstanding.
Maynard Berra is band manager with the Lytton Dene. He says the council's vote will make it easier for them to work with the city. The nation has already banned the mayor from its territory.
It was really painful, but it's great to see that City Council did the right thing here. And now we can kind of move forward with City Council and not have to deal with Mayor Ron Paul.
Berra says the mayor is still not welcome on Lytton land or at First Nations events, but he says council's actions are a step towards healing. Betsy Trumpener, CBC News, Prince George.
Watering restrictions are now in place in Metro Vancouver. If you have a lawn, it can only be watered once a week in the morning. Even-numbered addresses on Saturdays, odd numbers on Sundays. Watering trees, shrubs, and flowers is allowed any day from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. if using a sprinkler, or at any time if you are hand watering or using drip irrigation. All edible plants are exempt from restrictions. The rules aim to save drinking water as forecasters expect another hot, dry summer. The restrictions are in place until at least mid-October.
We just do not have enough assurances that the risks that are being posed to our community are being mitigated.
Squamish District Council votes down a plan to bring in a floating hotel for construction workers. The fallout after the break. Squamish District Council has voted down a plan to bring in a floating hotel. It would be used to house around 650 workers building a liquefied natural gas processing and shipping plant. The so-called flotel has provincial, federal, and First Nations support, but as Chad Pawson explains, councillors are not convinced it's a good local fit.
Woodfibre LNG up Howe Sound south of Squamish is already being built and set to be in operation in 2027. But Squamish's local government is grappling with where hundreds of workers needed to complete it will live. Floating housing is a novel idea. Workers would come and go from the vessel with minimal impact on Squamish and its residents. 2 weeks ago, hundreds showed up to a public meeting, with most speaking against the idea. Councillors said they heard them and last night rejected issuing a permit to allow the flotel, saying they still don't know enough about risks such as traffic coming and going, waste from the flotel, safety issues involving workers, and even hazards such as a possible landslide.
In my opinion, we just do not have enough assurances that the risks that are being posed to our community are being mitigated through this temporary use permit.
Also at issue here, governance. Despite other levels of government supporting a flotel, councillors in Squamish see their jurisdiction under pressure to go along despite not knowing enough. So, what now? Construction of Woodfibre LNG is ongoing, with even water lines and gangways for the flotel. Local councillors in Squamish expect this issue to be back before them soon, with either other options or more assurances over the flotel. Chad Pawson, CBC News, Vancouver.
Here we have a time lapse of downtown Vancouver overlooking or looking at Lonsdale Quay. As we can see from this time lapse, Doris will have our full forecast coming up next, and it's going to be a mixed bag.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Darius Madavi joins us now with a look at our weather. Darius, rain, shine, a mix of both?
A mix of both, yeah. We got another day of rain, and then we are getting into another wet pattern, so expect starting this weekend and continuing into next week, plenty of rain. But for tomorrow, nothing but sunshine. We start to see that cloud start to move in on Friday, overnight for the west coast of the island, and then not reaching us until sort of midday here in Vancouver. And even then, there should be breaks in the cloud, just mostly cloudy skies on Friday. Some of that rain starts to arrive midday for the west coast of the island, and then making its way to the lower mainland following that. So sort of overnight Friday into Saturday. Saturday and Sunday are both mostly dry, but there will be showers at times. But Sunday morning in particular is looking pretty dry for those doing the marathon or going out to support those doing the marathon. So don't worry too much about getting soaked then. If we take a look at our precipitation across the province, though, most of that activity is on the south coast until we get into the later parts of the weekend. Then we start to see a bit more activity in other parts of the province, like the southern interior and up in the north as well, especially all along the coast. So a bit of a wet pattern we're getting into next week, but for now, temperatures are going to continue climbing into the week, particularly in the interior, but here on the coast as well. We do get temperatures coming up a little bit more tomorrow, and then they should be staying relatively high through most of the weekend, although there will be dips at times over the next week or so, but still hovering probably right around seasonal. Inland, particularly warm, but here, even in Vancouver, hovering around 15 degrees or so, give or take a few. Although I should mention there is a risk of frost for inland sections of Vancouver and in the Fraser Valley tonight, so be aware of that because temperatures are going to get very close to zero and potentially the next few days as well. But with that being said, plenty of sunshine over the next few days for most of the province. Lots of sun tomorrow in particular. A few places where we might see some showers in those early morning hours, but generally staying pretty dry. And here in Vancouver, in terms of a 5-day forecast, we do have lots of sunshine tomorrow. We get a little bit more cloud building in Friday, and then we enter the wetter period, especially as we get into next week.
Well, it wouldn't be spring without a mixed bag of weather. Thank you so much, Darius.
Thank you.
That is your late news for this Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For news anytime, visit our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. That starts tomorrow morning at 5:30. Have a great night.